Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to the Artist to Storyteller series final event of our second season. My name's Steph Hankinson, and I'm drama faculty here at South Seattle College. And it's my great pleasure to introduce you to today's guests. We've got English professor Johnny Calavitta-dos Santos and two of his former South students, Alia, Hassan, and Danielle Matthews. Before I introduce them, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement to set our intention and energy before we become immersed in our conversation. We would like to acknowledge that the Artist to Storyteller project is located in West Seattle, the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. Members of our team were born and raised in the traditional lands of the Suquamish, S'Klallam, Chumash, Tongva, and Shawnee and Kickapoo tribes. We would like to honor the stewardship of these indigenous peoples whose land and stories we have the privilege of having been shaped by. We would also like to express our hope that our land acknowledgement and others like it are just a first step, and that land acknowledgements alone don't do a lot for Native people. If you live and work in Seattle on occupied Duwamish lands, we hope that you'll consider giving monthly to Real Rent Duwamish, and that you'll attend and support the wonderful events that take place at the Duwamish Longhouse and the Cultural Center. You can also take time to educate yourself on the treaties that impact Native tribes in your area, many of which have not been honored by the United States government. Thank you. So a bit about the Artist to Storyteller series for those of you who are joining us for the first time. The Artist to Storyteller speaker series was fueled by the desire to put BIPOC artists, performers, and activists directly into conversation with students and the community, and to create new spaces for human connection, which celebrates creativity in all its forms. Today's event marks the close of our second season, the theme of which has been return. Despite the continuance of the pandemic, which recently reached a record 1 million deaths in the United States, the highest of any nation, the lifting of the mask mandates and the easing of other restrictions have suggested a return to normal. But is it even possible to go back? Do we want to go back? Not only did the pandemic upend pre-COVID lifeways, but it exposed the deep inequities and injustices in our systems that make the idea of returning to normal feel more like a threat than an aspiration. As the public theologian Ekemene Uwan writes, striving to return to an old normal would ensure that the mechanisms of oppression keep turning. We're not going back to normal. We're pushing towards a new normal, one that's more sustainable and equitable than the one we left behind, one in which everyone might flourish. Artists, particularly those that whose experiences have been shaped by dispossession, displacement, and exile, have created work that's meant to help us think through the concept and nature of return as an aspiration, a fool's errand, or a threat. What is it that we want to return to, and does it even exist? As if returning was an existential threat, we could strive towards this, right? Like, these are the questions that we're asking. And so the work of today's guests confront many of these questions. That's why I wanted to introduce our theme of return. But before we dig into all of that good stuff, I'd like to introduce our student guests, Alia, Hassan, and Danielle Matthews. Alia, hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. Alia is a first-generation college student at South Seattle College, hoping to transfer to UW's Foster School of Business. With a passion for mental health awareness, her drive came from being a single mother to her 2-year-old son and trying to make the world a better place for her child and other children around the world. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And second, we've got Danielle Matthews, an anthropology major at South Seattle College. She has a fascination with anything older than 2,000 years, especially ancient cultures. She hopes to dig in the dirt and share yet to be seen history. Her interests lie primarily in ancient Mesopotamian and ancient Egyptian cultures. Her real passion, however, is religious death rituals and funeral rites of antiquity. She's written many papers on the subject of antiquity, but also on racism, women's rights, and human rights, because while she loves to visit the world's past, she has to live in the present and wishes to make it the best world it can be. I'm glad to have you here, Danielle.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I just went to see the sequoia trees, and those are like over 2,000 years old. So it's right, you know.
It's absolutely stunning. And I'm so glad they're getting some protection now, because they would have been gone. They would have
totally
been completely gone.
Totally. And then last but not least, we've got Alia and Danielle's former English instructor, Johnny Calavitta-dos Santos, Johnny earned his MFA in creative writing and his PhD in English and literature from the University of Washington. While at UW, he took an interdisciplinary turn, studying climate change fiction, Arctic studies, and eco-poetry. His current book of poetry draws upon Yelp and TripAdvisor reviews to critique histories of disaster tourism and cultural heritage sites rooted in privilege, power, class, and colonialism. Dr. Johnny has taught at several colleges and universities on the West Coast, and his students have researched and written about hip hop studies, TV studies, LGBTQ2+ literature, among others. And many of the students have presented at research symposiums or through Wikipedia projects. Johnny loves working with the next generation who will shape the future. Welcome, Dr. Johnny.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so happy to be here, everybody.
Yeah, so finally joining Johnny, Alia, and Danielle is our faculty moderator and Artist to Storyteller co-organizer, Denise Verolmes. Denise is a communication studies faculty here at South Seattle College, and she's also a teacher, a legend writer, and cultural studies scholar, as well as a sometimes translator and web designer. A Jutina and first-generation Chilean American with deep ancestral roots in Warsaw, Poland, Denise's work is as hybridized as her identity. A jack of many trades and master of none, her work is driven by a deep love for the emancipatory potential of storytelling. Thanks for being here, Denise.
Always a pleasure.
And a special thanks for anyone that's joining as audience members. So while our moderator, Denise, is going to chat with the guests, you can feel free to just raise your hand if you have a question. I know most of you here, it looks like we've got Paige, Rick, Paul, Amiko, several faculty. So if you have a question for the guests, just go ahead and raise your hand and we'll have that question pop into the conversation. If the timing isn't right, I won't forget about you, but I will kind of mark down whose hands went up first so that we can revisit your questions in the Q&A. But let's say hi to the faculty that are here. Like Rick is here, Tish is here. What's up, guys? Hiya.
Hello.
Hello. Oh my gosh, so nice. Yeah, so feel free to keep your cameras on, off, whatever. Today's a little bit more informal as a conversation, just to chat about the amazing work that Danielle and Alia are doing and Johnny's doing in his class. So, all right, Denise, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Steph. That was a lot of words I wrote down for you to say. Sorry. It's Paul's fault. And then it's mine because I added more. Welcome, everybody. So again, thank you to people that showed up to be with us today for this conversation. And then especially thank you to Johnny, Alia, and Danielle for being with us and for talking about the work that you all did together in your English 101 class. And so today, this event that we're doing today for Artist to Storyteller is a bit different from what we usually do. So what we usually do is a student moderator and a faculty member will interview an artist about their work, right? And then typically, you know, the audience, we don't even see them, they ask questions. But today we're sort of opening it up. And instead we're interviewing, right, a faculty member, Johnny, and two students, Alia and Danielle, about their creative work that they did together through what Johnny calls the Monuments Project in his English 101 class. And so really what we're looking at is not just how, you know, artists, it's a chance not just for artists to share their work with students and students to ask them about it, but a chance for us to ask students about their work, and particularly their work in the context of a classroom, and how as instructors, we can support that creative work and be collaborators in it, right? In a way that really serves student interests and creative expression. And so we're basically here to talk a bit about the Monuments Project, which is this project created by Johnny that Alia and Danielle both did really amazing work in. And Johnny, I thought maybe as we sort of get this conversation going, if you want to tell people a bit about what the Monuments Project is and sort of where you got the idea for this project from, particularly in the context of a writing class. So I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. And thanks for that lovely question. And thanks for just letting us reflect on the work that we did. I really appreciate it. I would say the project came out initially. There was a call when I was living in California several years ago. There was a call from the LA Arts Council to redesign the space around where the Christopher Columbus statue was taken out, right? That's in Grand Square, LA, right in smack in downtown, and they removed that statue. And so there was basically like a hole like in the middle of downtown. And so the LA Arts Council was like, okay. And they put out the call for like the entire country, like who wants to redesign this? It was an open design challenge. And I saw that design challenge and I was like, oh, that's interesting, right? And I'm always looking for interesting challenges for my students. I'm always looking for authentic writing projects where we have a real audience and a real purpose. And part of that design challenge was a lot of writing about, well, what should be replaced? And there was a visual component, but it wasn't just a visual component, right? You could do a textual piece, you could do a textual display, you could do signage and billboardage. So I was fascinated with that. I was like, well, how could I put that into a writing class? So we just, my classes at the time wrote signage and artist statements for that challenge. We did not win, right? Like, we didn't win. And then so somebody won, right? I haven't kept track of it this was like a couple of years ago. And then I've just sort of kept that as a staple of my writing classes ever since, because it's still an open question for so many spaces and so many places. Like that design challenge hasn't gone away. That specific one has. So I hope that answers your question, Denise. Like that's how it began, was with a real design challenge. And that really just opened up this, what can my students do to solve a real problem, right? So it began as like this real project.
Yeah, so that's amazing. And then what is the project exactly? What are students being asked to do now that it's sort of like become part of your classroom space?
Yeah. So I use this project to teach a lot of English outcomes. Specifically visual rhetoric or different types of claims. So I introduced claims of policy by having students make policy claims about what we should do about monuments locally, state, federally. We read diverse authors, what they do, what their ideas are about monuments. We look at what Germany has done with their monument problem. So we look at all these authors. So I use it for reading. I use it for claims of policy. And so my students, we start by writing claims of policy, right? Can you make a really detailed source-based argument on what we should do with these monuments in our midst, right? That offend so many in our communities, that cause a lot of civic harm. And I've just been like astounded by the claims and the ideas and the artist statements that my students have made over the years. I'm always surprised. They always change my mind. This semester was all about putting them in museums and letting museums handle this nightmare mess. So I'm just, yeah, that's how it became sort of a writing and an English outcome project.
And so Alia and Danielle, you sign up for an English 101 class and you think, okay, gonna write some papers. And here you're given this sequence, right? This project sequence where you're being asked to redesign monuments. What was your reaction? What did you think when you were first given this assignment?
I think for me, I was like, is this an art class? Because I'm not artistic at all. But yeah, I was like, I'm not artistic. Like, why is he doing this? But I kind of like, at the end, I kind of understood like why we were doing it. And I enjoyed it more because it was more like things that we are facing now. Usually I'm so used to like, oh, read this book and, write a 5-page essay, a 10-page essay. And I promise you, I don't know who I'm reading about. And probably the next day when I submit it, I will forget everything I wrote about, even though I wrote a 10-page essay. But with this assignment, it stayed with me, and it stayed with me for a while. And I even did outside research outside of class because of how like impactful it was. And I don't think it was only towards me, but like for other students too, because we're like, well, this is different. Also, like, like writing claims about it and, having discussions, like the museum. Like at first, I didn't want them to be put in the museum. I was like, burn it down, burn it all down. I don't want to see them. I don't even want to talk about them. But it did change my mind. Putting them in museums, it would be the better option.
I honestly thought it was great. I thought it was fabulous. I've actually never seen a college class be so like excited to turn something in. I think maybe like one person in our class was just like, you know what I mean? But like the rest were like so excited about doing it and like really gung ho and like really brought it. You know what I mean? They had this enthusiasm that you don't see in an English class very often. I mean, some people are just like really into English, which is great. I'm one of those people. I am a reader, like literally in my off time, I'm probably reading or watching anime. So like it was really exciting to see a teacher be able to pull students in and want to do something. Especially because when they get out of high school, I'm kind of an older student myself, but like a lot of students when they get out of high school, they don't expect to, they don't want to do the work. You know what I mean? At least from my view. A lot of people, everyone's different, of course. But actually really seeing students engage, especially the younger students, engage and want to do a project and be happy about a project and be happy that they can do their own, bring their own thoughts into a project and do their own personal type of research into it. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, so what pulled you both into the project, right? What was it when you felt like really invested in this concept of monuments and the question of redesigning monuments and what monuments mean?
I think for me, I had a personal connection to it. You know, it's one thing to talk about, you know, things that have happened, but when you start talking about like the full story and getting like both perspectives, you realize that, you know, that could have been me. And when we were talking about where we would put these monuments that were so offensive, like the people were telling half of the story, which were white men who were doing inhumane acts to people. And some people were just seeing it as, oh, these are like, you know, historical figures, you know, these are this. But when you like sit down and you really like digest like what they were really doing, it's like, oh my God, it wasn't even that long ago. Like, and you start thinking about what we see today, what we're seeing now, and how like everybody is affected by it, especially certain groups. Like, and for me, it just kind of like woke me up a little bit more. It made me realize, you know, stuff like this is still happening and, you know, voices need to be heard. And creating this monument, I was coming from a perspective like, I'm going to put mine in a public place so many people can connect to it. So I think that's why for me, I had like a personal connection to it.
Very much the same for me. I very much pass for white, and it has given me a lot of privileges, but I also grew up very conservative Jewish and Native. My mother is half and half. My grandfather's parents fled Poland during World War II, and he met my grandmother, who is South American, Muika, and they met and were like fell in love. You know what I mean? And my mother and her twin. She's a twin, but my brother does not pass as well as I do, and seeing a lot that he went through, and even me when I would dare to wear a Star of David walking down the street, it really, it's one of the things that really got me into history, because you really start to see how things are different for people who aren't part of that culture, aren't part of that society. And especially in Texas, where I grew up, it's like they have a bill, a SB3, which literally allows them to make history what they wanted. And it's perverse and terrible. And it's not something I agree with at all, which is why I started doing my own research. But this monument project really brought all that, because you see so much of like the Confederate statues and things like that in Texas. And it always just like, it filled me with such rage. So this project was extremely personal for me. And I waffled about what I was going to do a lot, but I ended up doing something that, you know, I'm kind of passionate about. So like, it's just very, I think it's personal for everybody, because of, you know, you get to choose what vantage point you want to come from. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so it seems like for both of you in such different ways, from such different backgrounds, just felt that the chance to kind of intervene in the stories that our monuments tell, right? So monuments are acts of writing in these really expansive ways. And for people who aren't seen in them, right, or who are, the violence is kind of constantly reasserting itself by that kind of erasure, being invited to rewrite, right, that story in a way that includes people seems to be like it was a huge motivating factor for both of you, which is so powerful. And so I really am curious, could you tell us a bit about your projects? Like, what monuments did you end up deciding you wanted to reimagine, and what did you reimagine them as, and why?
So for me, like we talked about these monuments that are known, there's also other beautiful monuments out there. I fell in love with all of them, and like ones that stood out for me before I started doing my monument, I wrote it down here just so I don't forget. So it's called All Power to the People by Hank Will. Such a beautiful, beautiful statement. Another one is Staying Power, Black Women and Work by Deborah Wills. She did such a beautiful work talking about women's rights and workplaces for African-American women. And last one is Love is the Message by Jamal Shabazz. And it was just very emotional. Like, we hear about all these monuments that are being taken like down and stuff like that, but we don't hear about monuments that are like all over the world. Like, if I wasn't in this class, I wouldn't even know these amazing people that I discovered and their artwork that, you know, that symbolizes the strength and the beauty of intelligent people who have been oppressed like half of their life. So my monument kind of was based off of how I relate to other people that have been oppressed too. And I don't have the picture, but like, I'm going to give you guys the description. I did an African-American woman who had an afro, and she had flowers, roses, white roses with the splash of blood. And when I seen that image, it kind of got me thinking of like my hijab. Like, when we see a beautiful African woman wearing her afro or her braids or her locks or her braids, whatever it is just these negative thoughts that society has of her. Oh, it's not professional, or she looks ghetto, or she looks like, you know, she smokes weed when, you know. And then I think about my hijab, and the first thing people see is, oh, she's from Islam, or oh, she's a terrorist. So you know, and the white blood stains represent that we didn't know that none of this was a problem until we stepped out of our own society. I didn't know my hijab had all of these negative impact, sadly, until I stepped out of my own comfort zone. And I think it goes for a lot of people who have been picked on, who have been told that they're different because, you know, they're shaped weird or the color of their skin. I promise you, like at a young age, nobody knows that there's something wrong with them until they enter society, and the blood is just, you know, the insecurities and the heartbreak that we've gained living in a world where you're judged by your appearance.
Yeah, yeah. Appearance is just something that we should not be judging people by, but, you know, societal norms create society, and perpetuate other societal norms. My project was, I would have torn down, so there's, again, I'm from Texas, Houston, Texas, and there is a gigantic Sam Houston monument in the middle of Herman Park. I would tear down that monument. I mean, there's like 12 other I would tear down too, but specifically that one, just because it's so huge. And I did mine on Hypatia, who was not only one of the first genius women that we actually have knowledge of in ancient Alexandria from ancient Egypt. She was Greek. This was after the Ptolemaic period had begun. And so she was not only a philosophical genius, but a mathematical genius and an astronomical genius as well. And we have like records of this, and she was such a prominent figure in ancient Alexandria that even the Senate would ask for help. Like these men who stand above men asked her for help, constantly asked for her advice. And she actually ran one of the top philosophical schools in ancient Alexandria. Unfortunately, when Christianity took over for when Christianity finally took hold in ancient Alexandria, she was literally the first to go. So as soon as the vote went out, she was, her clothes were shredded. She was tiled with roofing tiles up into the agora, and then ripped apart and burned and scattered across Alexandria, all because she was a woman who dared to be a teacher or a mathematician or to stand above men. So that was, I'm not a big fan of like Greece in general, but that was just, it's something that kind of really hit home because you, again, where I come from, like if you're a woman, you sit quiet and you look pretty and you don't say anything. And it's just, I am not that person. You can ask Johnny, I'm not that person. I am loud and obnoxious and I will be in your face as much as I can be. And I just think that she is an example of something that happens to women constantly, unless you are virginal and quiet, or you are either the villain or the damsel in distress. You are never just a human being to be a human being, just living to survive. So it's just women's rights in general is just something I'm very passionate about. So that was my project.
So amazing, like how, you know, the ways in which you really think about how monuments speak to power, right? Or shape power, and who gets empowered and who doesn't, and the ways in which you're both trying to empower communities that have not had a lot of power, right? In the society sort of shaped by these previous monuments that we were speaking about. And Alia, I loved hearing, right? We talk so much about the monuments that we're trying to take down, but there's so many amazing, important monuments that people are putting up, including, I mean, in a lot of ways, you know, even though we don't get to walk to a park to experience your monument, just experiencing it in this space and hearing about it is so powerful. And Johnny, like, I'm just this has got to be an amazing process to work through with students. Like, and I'm just curious, like, what the process is for all of you. Like, how do you get to these spaces where you're thinking about what you want to deliver and express these messages through your monuments, right? These arguments that you're making, these histories that you're writing. Yeah, just what is that? What's it like for you? And just to collaborate. You know, how do you guys use Johnny? Johnny, how are you like sort of helping and supporting in this process of creation? What does that process look like in the space of the classroom?
I'll just say that I love starting with looking at what current monuments are being made and the debates that people are having about them. So, you know, we stand on the shoulders of giants. We look at the debate, we read about the debate, right? So we sort of like stick our oar in and we wade in the debate, right? And so many people know so much and bring so much to class already, right? Like I was hearing about monuments across the world that I did not know about. These monuments to comfort women in South Korea just were blowing our mind. There's one of a comfort woman on a bus, and it's like a permanent installation. So you're on a bus with a monument. It just blew our minds. So that's how we start, was just by like wading into all of these writers that are making these historical arguments, right? What is worthy of monumentalizing? Who is worthy of monumentalizing? Who should take up public space? Who shouldn't take up public space? Who owns public space, right? And it was fascinating when we got to Seattle monuments, that Confederate monument in Lakeview Cemetery is in private, right? It's a private cemetery. There's a private park in Ridgefield outside of Vancouver, Washington, with a Confederate monument, and it's there to this day, and it's private. So there's really nothing that, you know, Seattle City Council can do about it. So it's fascinating, like knowing that like public-private debate and just wading into that and seeing what everyone sort of came up with was brilliant.
Yeah, so you begin by exploring the issue, it sounds like, and even Alia spoke to the ways in which the works that you were all looking at together served as this like really important point of acknowledgement, right? And understanding the different arguments these buildings are making. And then what's the process like? So these monuments you envision, I know, Johnny, you were saying it can be textual, it can be this. How do you represent or speak about, like, what do these projects actually look like as things, as products?
You want me to show some images? Oh, that's like the cue the image.
Yeah, cue slideshow.
Okay, I get the hint, sorry. So folks, I'll just share a few images of the work that we've done across my classes at South, and across time and space. So here is, I'll start with this. So obviously we made claims, we wrote textual claims to policy, we wrote artist statements, and then we took some of those artist statements and we also made a manifesto. So we sort of wrote across writing genres, right? Claims, manifestos, artist statements, policies. So this was an amalgamation of several students' ideas. We just sort of made it into a manifesto about our beliefs, right? We wanted to just announce our beliefs because that's what a manifesto does, right? And so we love this idea of like, oh, we could put them in medieval art in a museum, right? It was like this little insider joke that we had. It was really funny. I had a lot of students wanting to speak directly to their communities, the Vietnamese community, the Somali community, the Mexican community in Seattle. I had a student who wrote a haiku, right? And wanted the haiku to be a monument. And I just thought that was brilliant. So here you have their haiku. So students just went all sorts of ways, which I just was blown away by. Here's a student work from our class. And on the right, you can see that this is a student drawing, right? A lot of students were like, oh, I'm not an artist. I'm like, okay. So that's where I got into visual rhetoric, right? And we talked about this idea of, well, are Americans more convinced by writing or by emotion and visuals, right? And Our class was like, they're on Instagram, right? We're convinced by visuals and emotions, not by
what is writing, right? What is writing, right?
Right.
This is writing, yeah.
This is visual writing. So after we talked about that, we were like, yeah, we want our ideas to hit Americans where they're at. And if they're looking at pictures, if they're looking at stained glass windows, if they're looking at, right, then we need to move into this genre of making, we call them, like moving text or visual text or whatever you want to go, or just images, right, like whatever. So the student on the right made this image on the right, and then we just put this one through, it's so easy. Picture format in a Word document can do the thing on the left. So we just wanted like different variations of our hand-drawn images. So we just plugged this into a Word document, hit the picture art, and voila, the student got something that they considered a little bit more polished, right? That looks a little more professionally done. But I love both versions and I love the story of both versions. But I like this idea of, like, once I showed students, like, look, you could just put this in a Word doc, go to picture, and there's all these like pre-programmed art effects, right? When students saw that, they're like, oh, okay, I can really just make a doodle, or I can get my idea, my brainstorm on paper, and then we can just do some pre-effect magic, right? So that was really transformative for a lot of people in our class, was knowing that just start with a brainstorm, just like the writing process, just give me a brainstorm of an idea and we can develop it, right? So I love that. We also turned to the makerspace, right, at South. So the makerspace helped us do these two, right? We used a program called Blender. I learned pieces of it in a couple of hours, right? You could spend your whole life on Blender. Some of my students do. But just a couple of hours, you can do stuff like this, right? Basic blocks, cylindrical stuff, or clip art and putting things together and then putting a wash over them. So the makerspace helped us do these two images right here. So I'm just so thankful to the makerspace help at South. And Danielle, here is your image. I just wanted to highlight. Did you want to just say anything about what we're seeing, how you worked it?
So I used I can't even remember what it's called, but it's where you can like overlap images and like crop and cut images online. So I started with an astrological background, of course, because of her because she was an astrologer. And I also had like the Senate, like a Greek style Senate type set in the background to note her importance. But honestly, what I really like is this image of Hypatia, because this is supposed to be like a rendering of Hypatia, because she never married. And like I said, like you either have to be like virginal and untouched, and that's what she was like. She refused to marry. She refused to do anything but be educated, like to have her education. But I have these like Greek letters falling out of her book and breaking on the ground as a form to specify like how all she wanted to do was this, but she didn't really get to live her life that way because nobody would let her, you know what I mean? And like it basically like shattered dreams, really. So yeah, it actually was a lot easier than I thought, but I did have some help. And I thought it was really amazing the way it turned out. I was very, very happy with it.
And I always wanted to ask, is that like fire imagery here, or is that just coloration?
No, that's actually part of the universal. So I'm not an astrologer, so I have no idea what it actually is.
It's the Crab Nebula.
Right? It's like it's some astrological thing. I don't know. I do know it's a meteor though. Like, that's all I got.
I love that. And just a few more images, everybody. I was blown away by some students really coalesced around like getting like K through 12 students to like make their own monument. Like we're making our monuments. So like, well, what about how far back can we go, right? When is it age appropriate to start like making monuments or expressing monuments that we think should be in the public forum? And I love this idea that they hit on of like giving children like paper dowels and asking them like, who do you think should be, you know, in public? Who do you think we should put outside? And so I love that idea. Just giving paper dowels to children and asking them to like, who do you want to see reflected, right? When you walk outside, who do you need to see? So that blew my mind. And then just some ongoing work. These are some other designs from our class. This one, they turn Mount Rainier into like a scan code. So you scan it and it's a survey, right? It's this idea of letting just the community, letting all of us, right, everyday people, decide what monuments should go in our public space. So this links to a survey where you can just say, oh, I think this should go in public space, or, you know, the Christopher Columbus statue in downtown Seattle, right? Or Texas or wherever, right? Here's what should go there instead, right? And you can sort of, there's pre-programmed ideas, or you can add your own, right? I love that. And then students were really fixated on, some of us didn't know about, the statue in Fremont, right? The Lenin statue in Fremont. So we spent a lot of time like discussing that and sort of like redesigning it. This one's still a work in progress. We would never figure out what to do with it. But I love how like some of my students are still thinking about the Lenin statue in Fremont and how to like redo it or get rid of it or melt it down or add something to it or change it in some way. But we, like a lot of students were fixated on the Lenin statue because it was their most local thing that they had seen or heard about. No one had really seen the Lakeview Cemetery Confederate. I mean, that's like, I've never seen it. It's like, you have to know where it is in the cemetery. But yeah, and I think that's it. And I'm seeing some hands up. I don't know if we.
Yeah, I was just gonna hop in and say, let's shift over to the Q&A because I know that Rick and Tish and everybody's got questions. I have like a million written down. So maybe we'll start with Rick since he was the first to ask, and then Tish.
I was wondering if, Johnny, you had thought of working with the art department to get some students to have their idea on what should be in that space.
I did, Rick. I emailed the gallery at South, and they were in transition at the time. So unfortunately, it didn't go beyond that. So I would love in the future, hopefully maybe a fall quarter, moving in that direction.
Because you've done gallery shows with students at other schools, right?
Yes. So South will have its time. Yeah.
Love it. Thanks. All right, Tish, let's pop over to you. What do you got?
Hey, first off, amazing work. I'm so impressed with all of you, and just amazing. Two things. One is, one of our former colleagues, he's just recently retired, but what he used to do, and I'll just throw this out as an idea, is his students in his English 101 class would create something, and then it would go to the art students to then do a visual representation. And so something I could see that would be cool, because I'm a stick figure drawer myself, is what if, like say Danielle, like she would come up with a description of their idea, but then she would work with an art student to create some sort of representation. That could be really cool. The other thing I'm just going to put as a noodle in all of your heads is, I know South is interested in getting some murals up on campus. This to me, I think there's a really great way that I think we could build from this monument project to propose a mural for South. So just think about it.
I think it's a great idea. And Tish, I love your, oh, Danielle, were you gonna go?
I was gonna say, like I said, when I said I had help, the friend that I had help with is actually an art student, a computer art student. So I did actually have help with that because I am a stick figure drawer as well. So
And I'm even a developmental stick figure drawer. Like I'm just like as low as you can go. That's me. So I sympathize.
Yeah,
we saw where that one fist really transformed with just some basic preset art calculate. Like it really did, like rotating it, cropping it. So stick can go so far. Stick goes far.
I mean, I love the idea too of really just having more sort of exploration about there is no sort of real limit to the way that the art could go, right? We could dip into what does this look like if you have students that are writing poetry and performing that? What does it look like when you've got students writing music that's like evoked from their perspectives, right? Interpreting the art or engaging with the monuments that you all are creating, right? Is like, it's just this jumping off place, and the ideas and that what you're trying to communicate, right? Thinking in that composition classroom just has all of these potential echoes and like ripples to it, right? Like that's just where my brain was going when I was hearing you all talk, is like, man, it'd be really cool to get like some slam poetry or thinking about what this looks like with other arts as well. Abbas, do you want to ask a question? I see your hand raised.
Hi, thank you for calling out on me. I just wanted to say all the students did amazing, and I really enjoyed it. There was one student in particular that stood out to me, which was Alia Hassan. I really liked the way she presented her speech and everything. It was just very amazing.
How did you find it? I totally agree. Why did it impact you? Like, can you talk us through like what it was about Alia's project that really resonated for you? Like, why did that impress you so much?
I feel like she stated points like that were very powerful, and she like the way she summarized and the way she presented her speech, it was just in like perfect condition, and I really appreciated that.
That's nice.
Thank you so much.
No problem, man.
Love it. Spread the love. My question's actually for Danielle and Alia. Can I just hop in and ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah, I was wondering, so I'm always thinking about like, okay, I have all these great ideas that I think are great in my head as an instructor about what I think the students are going to learn and what they're going to take away and how this is going to like work for them in their other classes or in their jobs. And so I just wanted to ask the two of you, like, what were your biggest takeaways from like what you learned with the project? Like, do you feel like it's helped in other classes or in your personal lives or just for you as a communicator? Like, what landed for you? What was your big takeaway?
I think for me personally, it did shape where I wanted to go, because after doing this project and like presenting it and showing it to my friends and family, I felt this drive of like wanting to share more and do more. And like literally yesterday, I was actually talking to an advisor and I was like, hey, I know I said I wanted to do this, but after doing this project, it kind of made me want to do this, and it opened up this door and that door and this door. So it really kind of like this especially really changed everything for me. Like, it may not be that deep for other students, but for me especially, I just have this drive of like wanting to do more research and share more and listen to, other people's perspective and just educate myself on like what I can do as well.
And I know, Alia, but I think both of us were really sort of influenced by the class collective idea, which was put them in a museum, and we were very not that at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Both of us wanted to like burn them down,
like
melt them down, turn them into a bridge, turn them into a bench, right?
Anything, just I don't want to see it.
But our class put up like very strong arguments about why they need to be preserved in a museum. I think we were very influenced by that.
Yeah, it kind of did, because I kind of did understand why though, because if you really think about it, putting them in a museum will, it will preserve the history that African Americans have been through. It's not like we're sweeping it underneath the rug. It's like, hey, this stuff actually happened. Let's learn about it, but like, let's not learn one particular part. Let's learn the whole story. Who were affected? How did it affect us till now? And I think that's the one thing I appreciated about having an open discussion, because if that point wasn't like, brought to light, I would have just been stuck on the whole burn it. I don't want to see it. I don't want I don't even want to think about it. I don't even want to have this conversation. Like, why are we doing this? But I'm glad that we did, because it makes more sense putting it in museums and, you know, me teaching history classes about everything and having more dialogue.
And there was another awesome point that a student made was, well, even if we put them in the SAM, we put Lenin in the SAM or the Houston Art Museum or whatever, you still have to pay to see it. So the history is behind a painting. And that was another counter art that was like, oh my God, okay, so it just kept getting deeper and deeper. And I was like, well, maybe you're right, the museum idea isn't perfect. Maybe we should just melt Lenin down. You know?
Well, and the value, I mean, you all are demonstrating the value of public discourse around art and around history and around identity. Like, this is, I mean, I'm just so inspired by it. I thank you for sharing. And it's amazing that it's really directing your trajectory as like a student and a scholar and an activist. That's great. Danielle, what about you? I'm wondering about your biggest takeaway, and then I want to hop to Amiko for her question.
I personally, I've always been an activist. It is something I am extremely passionate about and always have been. My biggest takeaway from this, however, was letting people, because even as activists, I think sometimes we forget to, like, yeah, we can be allies and we can be co-conspirators, but standing behind someone when they need to have a voice is a lot more important than being there. Just being able to raise someone up to speak their own truth is something that is a very big takeaway, because you see all these people doing that with creating their own monuments and having a voice, even if it is like a monumental voice instead of a spoken voice, or whatever variant you choose thereof. Being able to view someone else's thoughts and position on something without an argument or a consistent nagging, I guess would be a word for it. Just letting people have that time and have that emotional support. You know what I mean?
That's beautifully put, like conditioning of like how we listen and what space we really actually do give to people rather than just waiting to speak, right? Like, that's a big shift. Amiko.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all that with me. And I just wanted to share that I'm an art faculty member. And so this has been really interesting to listen to. And I was thinking a lot about how you were, Danielle and Alia, you were thinking about your personal connections to the project. And that's reflected in all the things that you produced. As a fine arts faculty member, I'm curious to know if I could have you speak a little bit more about the writing aspect and how, like, I'm really interested in these different genres that you explore, like the manifesto, the artist statement, the policy of claims, and the visual rhetoric. All that is really interesting to me, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about how that process went for you too, and how that might have contributed to this overall like building of the counter memories and the counter memorials that you all created together as a class.
Personally, what I found really amazing is that a lot of times I feel like even me, and I read a lot, like I didn't even know what half of these things were. And like you hear them in passing, but you don't really think of the connotation behind how it's written, or how it's supposed to be. Because you go into an English class and like Alia said, you get handed a book and you write a 5-page essay on it. And then, you know, that rinse and repeat, you know what I mean? But this was actually extremely interesting, because you literally, each project or each writing was a different type. Like you literally had to change the entire way you were thinking and how you wanted to write it. Because having a manifesto and you know, speaking on how you want this to be, what you want to change, how you want things to change, how passionate you are about it, is completely different to say an op-ed, which you need research for, and you need to have an opinion, but you also need to have an argument for that opinion. Like, very different writing styles. And I thought it was amazing that that they brought in different aspects to writing that I feel like you don't really see very often, or that I've never really saw in an English class.
Johnny, put that on your CV. That was so perfectly said. That's so amazing. Alia, I want you to speak to it as well. I love this question.
Of course. I think when it came to the writing part, I think the main goal was just to improve our writing skill and like argumentative forms. So when we did the claim, it was 6. If I remember, it was claim of facts, claim of definition, claim of value, claim of cause, claim of comparison, and claim of policy. Right? I remember these things because, you know, I was passionate about it. So, and the reason why it stuck to us is because like we were coming from a perspective of these stuff matters to us. How can we write it down and present it? And how can it be taken serious? And I think because we had that mentality, it kind of not only did it make sense, but it was easy in a way. So
because you had that personal connection, right?
Yeah.
You just jogged my memory about all the claims I had us write, right?
Yeah.
So like that student who wrote a haiku for a monument, like that was his claim of definition. He's like, I define a monument as a haiku, right? It doesn't have to be something in public. It can be something on a page. And I was like, okay. You know, like it really actually changed my mind. I had never thought of, okay, it doesn't have to be a statue. It doesn't have to be a billboard. It doesn't have to be. And then we had people comparing things. We had people doing brilliant claims of definition, which I just didn't think about. So I think that's all those claims were brilliant that we did.
Yeah.
This is just beautiful stuff. And we're so lucky to have you two here talking about your experience and what you've learned and what you've created and where you're taking us next, right? As faculty at South with all of our students. And Johnny, we're so lucky to have you as well. And I think these acts of just like teaching through this, you know, core value of like, let's just implode these gates that keep us locked into a single discipline or a way of thinking about writing or a way I think about expressing myself and thinking about myself in relationship to history. It's like, it doesn't serve, right? Like this is what serves. And Danielle and Alia and Johnny, you're showing us like how that learning is so much deeper and so much more important than writing some 5-10 page essay. Who cares, right?
Right.
No one will read but me.
Right? Which no one will read but Johnny, right?
But also you guys learn what I think is at the heart of like what should be at the heart of a writing class, was how deeply our thinking and what we're trying to say depends on the forms that we're trying to say it in, right? Like
so right.
Yeah.
And trying to find the right path, the right genre, the right type, right? Like so like way more effective of a writing process, I think. Yeah.
Right. Well, this is wonderful. And I, you know, again, I can't thank you all enough for coming and sharing your perspectives with us. We're going to be using some of these conversation pieces to have our faculty conversation in a couple of weeks, where all those faculty members are going to be bringing their own community-based learning projects across disciplines. And so I really can't wait to see how that shakes out, because Johnny set the bar like pretty high for us, right? In terms of what this learning looks like and what it could look like and the potential. And you all have given us such great examples to think about and inform our teaching and talk to our students about how that's going to be in our different areas. And so I'm just so grateful for all of this. And for anyone that's tuning in, that's not coming to that faculty conversation in a couple of weeks, we'll see you next year at the start of our 3rd season in the fall. And stay tuned for season announcements and season themes and everything for season 3. But thank you all so much.